Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Dakota Hewlett. I'm with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. I work in our Parks and Recreation Division as the Non-Motorized Trails Grants Coordinator. I'll talk a little bit more about what we do in our division of the DNR and what I do. We'll talk a lot about trail connectivity, some trail management issues, and just general topics facing the trails community, trail users, and trail managers. I'm sure many of your counties around the state are also involved in recreation management to some degree in trails as well. So it's been a really important topic, increasingly important topic over the past few years. So with the DNR Parks and Recreation Division, I like to say we are the fun division of the DNR. We manage over 100 state parks, over 350,000 acres of land, boating access sites, 13,000 miles of trails, historic sites, some really great places to visit across the whole state of Michigan, and that's another really great strength of what we do is that we're really well distributed across the state of Michigan to provide recreational opportunities to visitors and to residents of Michigan across the whole state, whether it's up in the western UP or down in southeast Michigan. We've got some great places for you to visit. So talking today specifically about trails, and I want to talk about what our state designated trail system is, what that means, and the kind of trails that we touch with our programs and our management. So when I use the term state designated trails, I'm referring to trails that are on state managed land, so a state park or a state forest, or a trail that has been heavily financially supported by state programs, DNR grants, things like that, or large statewide trail initiatives that cross multiple jurisdictions, regional trails or statewide trails that impact recreation in a statewide way. Many of those are considered state designated trails as well. So you can see on this map, we've got a really good geographic spread of state designated trails. And down in the southern half, it looks a little more sparse, but it's hard to tell because a lot of our trails in that area are smaller looped systems in state parks, so they're still there. They're just not as widely stretched as a lot of those snowmobile trails you see there in the Upper Peninsula. But we definitely have some statewide reach and work really closely with other partners outside of our agency and with local agencies and other state and federal agencies to manage recreation facilities across Michigan. We're really proud when we look at this map to see that we have so much great coverage for people across the whole state. So drilling down into that a little bit, you can see we've got a great representation of trail mileage for a lot of different trail users in Michigan, and that's key to provide an opportunity for everyone, no matter what type of activity they're interested in participating in. So we've got a lot of snowmobile trail mileage, hiking trails, biking trails, off-road vehicles. If you're interested in doing a trail activity in Michigan, we've got a lot of great places to do it, spread geographically throughout the state. Like I said, over 13,000 miles in our state designated trail system. And that covers across all DNR land management types. So those are our state parks, our state forests, and our state game and wildlife areas. And that's really important because that's 3 different divisions within our department that work together to manage those facilities, those trails. And of course, we couldn't manage such a robust trail system without the partners that we work with. Those could be, snowmobile clubs and ORV clubs, local government partners, volunteers, and nonprofits that help us to maintain and manage those trails to a high degree of maintenance. And then we have 5 citizen advisory groups that advise us on our management of trails that cover specific interest areas and trail use types. We meet with those groups about 4 times a year to discuss trail issues that are facing the department or recreational users as a whole in the state of Michigan. So I just want to talk a little bit about how we're structured. I know many of you are familiar with the term of like a watershed approach to management, being that trails are kind of laid out very similar to rivers and streams. We call it a trail shed management approach, and we have staff assigned to each of those geographic regions that you see on the map, managing the trails and recreational facilities in those areas. We call those folks trail specialists. They work directly with our motorized trail clubs, our volunteers, our mountain bikers and equestrian trail users, and our park staff to manage trails to the best that we can in those geographic areas, and really find that focusing geographically kind of magnifies the expertise that we have out there with our field staff, and the ability for them to work with stakeholders in that geographic area. So wrapping up, earlier in 22, we wrapped up the new updated State Trails Plan, which was ended up being a 2-year-long effort to update the strategic planning document that guides us in our management of trails. We had in 2013 the very first statewide comprehensive trails plan in the state of Michigan, and that was mandated through legislation that the department create the plan. So this is the second iteration of that, and really helps us to guide the work that we do over the next 10 years. This is to be a 10-year plan. And we're really looking for quality trail experiences to lead a lot of the work that we do. We want to make sure that the folks who are coming out to visit our trails, or the folks who live nearby and visit their local trail every day, really have the opportunity to have a quality experience. Quality outdoor recreation experience is really important for us. Stewardship of the public land that we manage. I mentioned our division manages a little over 350,000 acres of public land. The department on a whole manages more than 4 million acres of public land. So that stewardship component is super important. As well as we're not separate from community and economic prosperity. Tourism and outdoor recreation is such a big part of our economy in Michigan that we're very involved in that part of our economy as well. So we're thinking about partnerships, aligning the resources that we have and the resources that our partners have, and using data to make decisions to help implement this plan and manage our trails to the best of our ability. So there's 4 goals in the new State Trails Plan, sustainable maintenance and development being the first one, and in my opinion, the most important. We've done a really good job over the past number of decades to build recreation infrastructure in the state of Michigan, but now it's time to really make sure that we're not forgetting about maintaining the infrastructure that we have out there, the parks, the trails, and the great places that people like to visit. Those were invested in decades ago, and now many of them are ready for some reconstruction, some rehab, some maintenance work. That's really important for us to keep at the forefront, and continuing to develop sustainably where we can, where we have the resources, and where it makes sense to build new recreational infrastructure. Funding, of course, funding is a goal on pretty much every plan that you see. And really continuing to strengthen our ability to use the funding that's available to us. Often that's a conglomeration of partnership funds from stakeholders, local agencies, volunteers, or donations, as well as federal and state grant funding sources. We do not get very much general fund dollars coming into our division, so we're very much self-funded. A lot of our recreational users pay their way. They pay for us to maintain the facilities that they like to use. Planning and collaboration, that's the partnership component that really feeds what we do. We would not be able to maintain 100 state parks and 13,000 miles of trails without the collaboration with other partners, local agencies, federal agencies. So with the trail plan, we really want to continue to strengthen our ability to collaborate with outside agencies and other partners to continue to strengthen our trail system. And then marketing, promotion, and education. So we've realized that we have a great trail system in the state of Michigan, but we're not always the best at getting that message out to prospective trail users, whether they're visitors from other states, other locations, or even people who reside in the state of Michigan. We want to continue to strengthen our marketing efforts and promote the work that we do and the great outdoor recreation opportunities that we have right here. So we're going to transition a little bit and talk about what it takes to build and maintain and manage a trail. So trail building can be a difficult process. In many cases, it's not unlike building a large road or a highway in some cases. So who is involved? Most projects I've worked on, we have a long list of partners involved, including local agencies that could be cities, townships, counties, others, state agencies, including the Department of Natural Resources and often the Michigan Department of Transportation, depending on the type of trail that's involved, other state agencies as needed as well. Local partners are really the key, so those could be trail user groups, supporters of recreation, things like that, that, you know, those groups that really support the type of work that we do and support, you know, trail building and you know, using trails to continue to improve their own communities. Other stakeholders, that could be a chamber of commerce and, you know, organizations that see the value in recreational trails and want to continue to see more trails built. And that robust list of who's involved in trail planning and trail building is important because it really leverages the resources that are available. Each of us have different funding sources that we have access to and different expertise when it comes to the work that we do in the public sector and, you know, in our nonprofit partners as well. So leveraging all of our partners together, that's really how you build a trail and how you connect things across communities is relying on the strengths of all of the organizations that are involved. So when it comes to trail building, I often think of it as more of a cyclical approach rather than a linear approach. So there is a life cycle to really any infrastructure that we build. That starts with an idea. That idea usually coming from a local partner, local recreational group or user community group. That idea is, hey, we'd love to have a park here. We'd love to build a trail from our community to the next community, or we'd love to have a trail that goes from our schools to the park. That idea, you know, is best when it comes from a local supporter, a local resident, someone in the community, and then from there, it's really time to gather some community input. You know, what are people looking for in their recreational opportunities? Are they looking for a trail from the school to the park? Maybe the trail should go somewhere else. Maybe they're trying to go downtown. You know, that community input, public input is super important to make sure that you know, the work that we do further down the line supports what the community actually wants and the community needs. Trail connectivity is super important right now. We have a lot of trails out there. The work that we want to do now is to make sure that we have connectivity to the destinations and the places that people actually want to go. So once you've got that idea, you've worked with the community to nail down what type of trail they would like to see in their community and what the needs are that they have that need to be served by this trail. You go into planning and feasibility work, so that would be, for some local agencies, they have the staff and the resources to do a lot of that in-house, whether with their road departments, road commissions, parks and rec departments, other parts of local agencies, and many also contract that work out to consultants to help with planning and feasibility. So that looks like at the route of the trail, the topography, the water, the cost, all of the different factors that would lead to a successful project in the future. And that's a phase that you really can't skip. In some cases, those can be handled largely in-house if you have the staff and the resources to do it. But you know, it's super important to make sure that you do you know, do your due diligence, do the planning and the feasibility work ahead of time, so that if you start to spend money doing some engineering, if you start to look for some grant funding and put some grant applications out there, you know what you're talking about and you already have a really solid plan in place for the project that you'd like to implement. From there, we go into design and engineering. Most trails, if we're talking a paved trail, a hiking and biking trail, you know, connecting communities, that is, you know, like I said, very similar to designing a road between those communities or between those destinations that you're connecting with the trail. It's a 10 or 12 foot ribbon of asphalt. It's, you know, it's like building a one-lane road. Does take some significant design and engineering work, especially if there are topographical issues, water crossings, river crossings, things like that. You know, these are real pieces of infrastructure. We need to continue to think of them that way, and they should be designed seriously when you get to that point. Construction. So, of course, construction would be the next step, and you know, very similar to many of the other projects that we implement. And I think the hardest part with construction for us sometimes is to keep trail users off the trail while it's under construction, because people get so excited that they're practically riding their bike right after the asphalt paver, because they're ready to go and they're really excited to see that trail in their community. And then from there, the last step is really what brings this back into a cycle and not a linear model, is that maintenance is super important. So maintenance loops this back together. Once, the minute that construction crew leaves, your maintenance phase starts. You need to have maintenance funding as part of your discussion, probably from the planning phase all the way through, because trail maintenance can be quite expensive. To do it right, we're looking at a few $1,000s a mile for a paved trail per year, at least. And if you've got bridges or other infrastructure, culverts, that maintenance cost goes up. So thinking about maintenance and the importance of maintenance is crucial to make sure that the recreation opportunity you're providing to residents continues to be a high quality experience in the future. So to get there, we've got to talk about some different avenues for funding. So when I think about funding, I usually break it up between design and engineering funding and construction funding. Those two phases of a project generally can have some different funding sources and some different constraints that come along with things. With design, so with trail design and engineering, a lot of the funding needs to come from local match, private donations, stakeholders, and some grant funding sources, but many of the grant funding sources that we utilize here in the state of Michigan only cover a small percentage for engineering cost, if any. Some grant sources will not allow you to charge any engineering cost to that. So engineering can often be one of those upfront costs that can be challenging for local agencies because it can be pretty expensive, usually 10 to 15% of the entire project cost, and with those grant sources not covering engineering or not covering very much of engineering, that's a cost that the community needs to think about, and the stakeholders that are involved pretty early on, just to make sure that enough money can be put together to cover design and engineering costs. But the great thing is once you've got some engineering underway, that opens you up to starting to apply for some more robust grant programs that will fund your construction phase. So that's really important. There's some state and federal grants, as well as some really cool private partners and some foundations across the state of Michigan that are also involved in trails. So once you've got design a little bit more fleshed out in your plan, then construction funding can come along. There's some great sources that we'll talk about for construction funding on the grant side of things. So funding sources, I'm sure many of you are aware of a few of these. Maybe you've worked on them, worked with them, some of your Parks and Rec projects, here in Michigan. The most unique, I guess, funding source that we have here in the state of Michigan that makes Michigan a great place to live is the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. Most states do not have a state funding source like this. This is actually revenue from state oil and gas revenue that comes in from state land. And this grant program is available for both land acquisition and development projects. So if you're looking to buy a trail corridor or a park, some park land, or develop that, this funding source is definitely one to think about. And for local applicants, the maximum grant amount is $300,000 for land acquisition and development. But that can be a really big chunk of the budget depending on your project, and this is also a great funding source to match against some other funding sources. There is a match requirement for the Natural Resources Trust Fund, but their funds can match a lot of other grant sources, and really is a great way to fund projects. You see those green Natural Resources Trust Fund plaques at so many of our parks and trails across the state because they've been an integral part of making Michigan's outdoor recreation what it is now. So beyond that is the Recreation Passport Grant Program. So that is funding that's set aside from the money you spend to get the recreation passport on your license plate tag. That goes into a grant program that is available for local agencies as well. So recreation passport projects are generally smaller projects, not quite as large as the $300,000 amount there for the trust fund, but great small projects in communities and parks and trails and recreational assets, maybe $15,000, $20,000, $50,000, those smaller projects that can really kind of put the finishing touches on a project, renovate a project that really needs it, or add some great outdoor recreation amenities to parks or trails in Michigan. And then another one is the Land and Water Conservation Fund. That's actually federal funding that comes through the Department of Natural Resources, and it is administered by a section of our department for the state of Michigan. Those can be large grants as well, often in excess of $300,000 for great projects, natural resource projects. Those grants generally cannot match the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. So that's one thing to think about. The great thing here, any of these grant sources that say DNR on them, and MDOT as well, but we have regional grant coordinators that you can work with in your geographic region to help you identify what funding sources that the DNR has that may fit your project best. So you can talk to those grant coordinators and explain your project as you go through the process, and they'll help you kind of shop around for the best grant and help you with the application timelines, make sure that you have all the information available to you that you need to fund your project with any of the grant sources that they manage. So moving on, the Michigan Department of Transportation is a huge partner in recreational trail and alternative transportation development in the state of Michigan, and that's through their Transportation Alternatives Program. Those are federal gas tax dollars that come down through the Federal Highway Administration to MDOT, administered in this transportation grant program. Projects that qualify for the TAP grants are really alternative transportation focused. So where the DNR is focused on recreation, MDOT is focused on transportation, but there is a lot of overlap and a lot of partnership between our two agencies. These are the trails that connect communities, the trails that connect great destinations and assets within your community. If it provides a transportation benefit to the community or to surrounding communities, those are the great projects that MDOT's TAP program can facilitate and provide funding for. Those are development projects only, no land acquisition, and generally tend to be larger projects, oftentimes $1, $2, $3 million projects in one phase. But a great partnership and a great resource to be aware of if you're interested in trail development in your community or if you're interested in connecting with other surrounding communities. Again, MDOT has their own staff of grant coordinators that can help walk you through the process and describe the application procedures and things like that for the grant program. The last grant program we'll talk about are the motorized trails that we manage in the state of the Department of Natural Resources. So we've got a really robust trail system, snowmobiling and off-road vehicle trails. Primarily in the northern lower peninsula and the upper peninsula, there is a little bit of motorized recreation further south as well. But we work with snowmobile clubs, off-road vehicle clubs, and some local agencies and partners to provide funding to maintain and develop snowmobile and off-road vehicle trails. So if you work in a community or a county that has those trails, that's a great one to be aware of and work with us on potential projects or connections to those motorized trail systems in your community. Last, but certainly not least, I want to talk about private fundraising a little bit because this has opened up a little bit more in the past few years, at least for us and the way we manage our projects and the things we have going on. But there are some really interesting foundations and corporations and philanthropists throughout the state of Michigan who are increasingly interested in supporting outdoor recreation. So it's important to connect with those those folks if they're in your area. Many of them are very geographically minded, so they may be interested in funding a project in one community but not in another, or one part of the state but not another part of the state. But reaching out to those foundations and those corporations and making them aware of your project and the work that you're doing, I think is really important. That's just the first step is just shaking their hand, get to know who they are and the types of projects they like to support with private funding. These private funding sources can be great to cover the match requirements on larger public grants, and they can be great to do some planning or engineering work ahead of time so that you're ready for those larger grant programs. So don't forget to reach out to potential donors and private funding sources within your own communities.
Dakota, can you field a question real quick from online since we're talking about funding?
Yes, of course.
Phil Morris in Oceana County over on the Lake Michigan shoreline. His question is, can a grant that is funded by the state be matched by another grant that is funded by the state? So basically piecing two state sources together.
Yes, it is possible. It depends on those grant programs. And the type of project that's involved. The grants management section, those grant coordinators that I mentioned would be able to help you walk through that. And it would also depend on the department, the state department that those funding is coming from. If there's funding available from other departments or other initiatives, that often can be a great match. DNR does not always allow all DNR grant sources to match other DNR grant sources. They can to some extent, but that's a great conversation to have fairly early on in a project with your regional grant coordinator.
And then a quick follow-up to that while we're still on funding sources. You mentioned that there are private sector entities or foundation entities, nonprofits that are getting more involved in the outdoor field. Could you mention some examples that our members might know of here in Michigan that are being more aggressive?
I'll mention a few, but just because I mention them does not mean they're interested in the project in your area. It takes a lot of communication with the private funder to build that relationship and open up that door. If you're familiar with some of the work going on in Southeast Michigan, the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation is a great resource, and they've made some great investments in outdoor recreation in Southeast Michigan and in Buffalo, New York, because those are the two focus areas that they are focused on geographically. But they've really helped connect other funding sources as well and help build projects from the ground up in communities that need it. So that's been I would say a model resource for the private side, and the foundation side is they've got a really robust set of staff and a great ability to bring people together to help support projects. That's a great example. There are some other foundations throughout the state, kind of in the Grand Rapids area and in northern Michigan as well, who are interested in community foundations. Could be a great resource as well for small grants. There's a lot out there. It really varies based on the type of project and the geographic area that you're working in, what type of private funding you might have access to.
Dakota, I'm just curious, the Natural Resources Trust Fund, where do those dollars come from?
Yes, so that's oil and gas revenue from state land. So, primarily up in northern Michigan, there is some oil and gas exploration work that's done on state forest land primarily. Any revenue generated from that goes into the Natural Resources Trust Fund, which I believe has $500 or $600 million in it. And then there's an appointed board of trust fund trustees who meet every year to discuss how that fund operates, how it's doing in the market, investment-wise, and then they make a choice of, how much money each year can come out of the larger fund sustainably to fund projects. So the amount of projects and the amount of money dispersed each year can vary depending on market conditions and what that board deems is appropriate for the year. But they're able to go through the list of projects, the applications that are received, and pick the land acquisition and development projects that they'd like to see happen. So it's a great resource. Most other states don't have such a robust funding source for recreation. So we're really grateful in the state of Michigan to have that. It's been around for decades.
Question time? Full question time?
I think I have a few more slides.
Oh, okay.
And then we can go to full question time. So before we're done, I wanted to talk about some emerging trends and issues facing trail managers and parks and rec agencies. Much of this, faces agencies nationwide, but increase in demand for recreation. I'm sure we're all aware of, the increase in demand that the pandemic brought to our parks and our trails and our community assets. That demand has not gone back, at least for us, to pre-pandemic levels. We're still seeing really high demand for our state parks, for camping, for trails, things like that. All of the infrastructure and the facilities that we manage are continuing to see really heavy demand. Our summer weeks look more like our summer weekends used to look, and our summer weekends look more like our holiday weekends used to look. So that's been quite a strain on our staff, our seasonal staff. A lot of our parks rely heavily on seasonal staff, and the folks that do work out in our field units. So that demand is great to see. We're really happy to see folks coming outdoors and using our facilities and engaging in healthy lifestyles and outdoor recreation and you know, the natural places that we have in Michigan, but it's definitely something to think about from a management perspective, how you can continue to manage that increased demand, you know, with your local agency and the partners that you work with, and continue to provide high quality experiences for those visitors. Moving on from that, electric bikes, e-bikes, and other electric devices. So there are 3 classes of e-bikes defined in state law now in the state of Michigan. That happened back in 2017. E-bikes are continuing to be an increasingly popular way to use trails and bike trails. So just being aware of what current e-bike regulations are and what your options are to change e-bike rules on your own facilities, you know, the parks and trails that you manage is really important. DNR has a web page dedicated to that, and you can reach out to me if you have specific questions regarding e-bikes. But we're seeing more and more e-bikes at our trails all the time. And then other electronic devices like you know, electronic one wheels and scooters and micro-mobility devices. You know, they're out there. We're seeing them used for transportation purposes in our cities. I think there are electric scooters here in Lansing. You know, we see those out on the trails as well. Generally, they're not actually, you know, they don't fit very well within what the, you know, the permitted uses on most of our non-motorized trails are. But they're definitely out there. People are using them. So just keeping an eye on how they're used and if there's any issues coming up. I'm sure, you know, land management agencies will have some updated policies in the next few years to take into account some of these devices that we are seeing. Diversity, equity, and oh, yeah, of course.
Back up a second. So, is there such a thing now as a non-motorized trail, or can the e-bikes go on those?
Great question. So, from the legislation that was passed back in 2017, 3 classes of e-bikes were defined, class 1, 2, and 3. Class 1 is a bike that the electric motor only kicks in when you are pedaling. So it's more of a pedal assist device. Class 2 can have a throttle, so you don't have to pedal, you can just push the throttle and go. And then class 3 bikes are pedal assist, but they go much faster. The motor will take them up to 28 miles an hour, which is pretty fast. The default set in the legislation was that class 1 bikes would be permitted on improved surface trails, meaning like our rail trails, our paved trails, you know, concrete crushed stone trails. Those class 1 bikes would be permitted. The other 2 classes would not be permitted. And then on natural surface trails like hiking and mountain biking trails, the default is that no e-bikes were permitted. The good thing with the legislation is that it left it open up to land managers, you know, local jurisdictions to change that. So if you'd like to, you know, opt into additional classes of e-bike use or restrict e-bike use on your facilities, you can do that with a public meeting. The state, you know, the law that was passed just said you know, the managing jurisdiction can make those changes as long as they hold a public meeting or some public input before that decision is made. DNR has not made any changes yet from what the defaults are. I do get a lot of questions and emails from e-bike users or prospective e-bike users who, you know, who may want to see additional e-bike use, or some folks who want to see less e-bike use. So it can be a hot topic, especially in the mountain biking world, on you know, what the thoughts are on e-bikes.
Thank you, and I'm glad Michigan's ahead of the wheel, because the federal government's still trying to define what an e-bike is.
Yes, yep, and that's caused a little bit of trouble too, because oftentimes our recreational users don't really understand the difference between federal land and state land or local land, or, you know, they're out there at a park, but they don't know whose park it is. They're just out there having fun. So that's another challenge that we face.
Dakota, to follow up on Stan's question, I'd actually written this down when I saw you were going to be here today. This clarification on what's an electrical bike, a couple weeks ago, spent some time on Mackinac Island.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume they were a class 1 e-bike being used on Mackinac Island, and even up, you know, in the state park area. So I'm sorry, so just to be clear then, did you say the DNR has, that would be permitted then today?
So Mackinac Island is a unique case. They're managed by the Mackinac Island, or the Mackinac Historic Parks Commission. So they're kind of a state park, but they're managed completely, you know, within their own entity. My recollection is that they don't allow e-bikes on the island at all, but that could be, I could be wrong. I've not been on the island in a few years. and it's also, important to point out that just because you have, some rules on paper about e-bikes, enforcement is tough. It's tough for our park rangers to look at a bike and know if it's an e-bike or not. It's tough to know what class an e-bike is, and frankly, our staff have better things to do than police what type of bike you're on. We've got to go out and clean the bathrooms and take care of the campgrounds and manage the trails. We just don't have the staff capacity to really look into that. So that's a bit of a disconnect between what's on paper and what the reality is. I go out and see e-bikes on the trails all the time, and that's something that I think agencies will continue to develop how they're going to manage those and what enforcement might look like.
And just so I'm clear then, because I want to go to, we have a trail across Clinton County, the CIS trail, and the class 1, and as you described it, I believe the ones I saw in Mackinac Island would be the class 1s. I saw that. In fact, I think I saw some park ranger people using them. So on a non-motorized trail, the class 1 would be permissible now.
Yes,
unless there was local restriction.
yes, on an improved surface. So like the CIS trail, class 1 bikes would be allowed because it's a crushed stone surface.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, yep.
Dakota, I think we've got a online question here.
Sure.
Back to the Michigan Natural Resource Trust Fund. Can trust fund money be used to fund national park repairs and care? And this is from her friends up in Alger County.
Oh, great question. So the federal government itself is not an eligible applicant for the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund, but there are some cases where a partnership project could be eligible. But you'd have to work probably with the county, and the county would be the applicant because the county is eligible for the trust fund, but the Park Service or Forest Service are not. I've been aware of a couple projects that were managed that way, where it's kind of a co-managed project. The county provides some funds, and then the federal agency provides some funds. You could potentially do it that way, but the federal agency itself is not eligible for the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. Cool. So going back from there, aging infrastructure, that's something that's excuse me, facing our agency, really head on right now. So many of our state parks were built early in the 1900s by the Civilian Conservation Corps or other volunteer groups and the agency back then. We've got a lot of aging infrastructure, whether they're buildings, roads, bridges and culverts, things like that, facing us. So when I talked about the trail plan, it really comes back to that sustainable development and maintenance goal. Our agency, at least, and I know many local agencies are feeling some similar pressures, but we get a lot of pressure from our recreational users to build more trails, build a trail here, let's build a park here, we want a campground over here, which is great, but we're having to make some tough decisions and say, right now we're not gonna build this right here because we'd like to put funds into maintaining and redeveloping what we have over here. So those are just honest conversations that you need to have with your recreational users, that we need to continue to invest in the infrastructure that we have, the parks that we have, and make sure that they're still available to them, because we've made some choices in the past where we've built something and maybe just let it go for 30 years and didn't really do a whole lot of maintenance. Funding definitely plays into that because there's a lot more funding available for building new shiny things than there is for maintaining the things you have. So that's one of the issues that's facing our agency pretty heavily right now. Trail etiquette is another thing, especially with that increased demand throughout the pandemic. We're seeing some user conflict. That can be conflict between different use types, between an equestrian trail user and a mountain bike, or between a snowmobiler and a cross-country skier. We're also seeing a lot of conflict just between the same, trail use type. So there's some great communication out from some groups about promoting positive trail interaction.
Can you go back a slide?
Yes.
I probably don't need those. You skipped over diversity, equity, and inclusion. Can
sorry.
you please explain the correlation?
Yes, sorry. excuse me, diversity, equity, inclusion, and relevancy, being relevant to, you know, the folks that we serve, the customers and the people of the state of Michigan is really important for our agency. So we are continuing to build programming, you know, hiring resources for hiring our own seasonal staff, and other resources to hopefully be able to be more inclusive of all communities that we serve in the state of Michigan, and continue to reach out to other potential recreational users that may have been underrepresented in the past. You know, I know at least when you think about certain DNR programs and things that the department does, you know, there's probably a clear demographic that you can picture in your mind. So we'd like to break out of that mold and continue to be better at reaching out to all the communities that we have across the state.
So I was at a DNR presentation a few years ago, and this topic came up then, and I think the concern I did, we want to be welcoming to the people that use it. But if you go into your typical state park, the gate's manned by a white person, the staff is dominantly that. Is the state doing anything to get the park staff to be more reflective of Michigan as a whole?
Yes, we would like to. This isn't my, you know, area of expertise necessarily, but we do have a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer that we've hired over the past few years who can really speak to that. But yes, we've really tried to look at new avenues for attracting, especially our seasonal staff, because that's really how people get their foot in the door with our agency. And, you know, reaching out to schools, to religious groups, to, you know, different communities and different organizations within both rural communities and urban communities to try to make sure that, you know, the opportunity is out there. If this is a job that you'd be interested in, you know, if you're looking for work in the summer, you know, really trying to reach out to all different types of people. I think that's something that we've done, you know, a job of in the past, but you know, can really continue to improve. But if you have specific questions, I could okay, yeah, yeah, yep. Was there another?
I got aging infrastructure. How do you decide where do you spend your maintenance DNR money? We got Muscatawa Trail down in Southwest, and the tire's really falling apart. The parks, you know, the Ottawa County Parks maintain it, but as far as money to resurface it, how do you make that decision where you put your money?
That's the million-dollar question, because we have definitely more infrastructure and more needs than we have money to take care of those needs with. So we, at least for the trails, I can speak more directly to the trails. We maintain a master list of projects that often sits, you know, close to $200 million. You know, projects throughout all geographic areas of the state, and then each year those that list of projects is reprioritized based on input from our field staff, our park managers, our park supervisors, you know, folks who work on the trails. Reprioritize that, make sure the most important projects are at the top, and then we start to match those projects with the funding sources and the funds that we have appropriated to our department each year. So it sounds nice, but it's kind of a messy process, especially because, you know, project priority can change based on, you know, conditions on the ground. We also feel certain political pressures for certain projects, of course, so that can change that prioritization a little bit. But we generally, you know, we maintain a master project list and reprioritize that every year. And then match, you know, at the beginning of each fiscal year, match those high priority projects with, you know, funding sources that work for them. The Muscatawa Trail is definitely on our list, though. We've got someone who will be undergoing engineering for that really soon. So that's good.
Is there a list you can look up on DNR, or has it changed so much?
No, not really. If you're interested, I would work with your local Parks District Supervisor or Trail Specialist. I'll get you in contact with them. Yeah, I think there's one in the back. Yep.
So Dakota, back to the DEI thing, might that include possibly busing people from inner city areas out to state parks or something like that? I mean, is that part of the program? Or
yeah, that's a really interesting point to bring up. Yes, it definitely could, and it might in the future. And going back to the way our department used to do things, you know, decades and decades ago, we used to provide housing, especially for some of our more remote parks. For summer staff, we would provide housing, so it wasn't, you know, that wasn't a question, because that can often be a problem. Is, you know, you get a summer job, but if you have to move to a different part of the state or up to a state park or something, oftentimes, especially these days, those scenic parts of the state that people want to visit on vacation, seasonal rentals there and, finding a place to live affordably while you work there is really crucial. So we're looking at, that transportation aspect that you mentioned in some of our urban park areas, as well as maybe a potential in the future to bring back housing for staff, so that is less of a concern for some of our seasonal staff as they come in to work in the parks. So I want to talk a little bit more about trail etiquette and just promoting positive interaction between park and trail users. So for me, the most important thing, the thing I really push is just smile and say hi. It's really hard to have a negative interaction with someone if it starts by saying hi, how are you? Have a great ride, have a great day, whatever it is. But that's the most important way to prevent negative trail user and recreational user conflict is just realize that we're all out there for the same reason. Some of us might be on a horse or a snowmobile or hiking or whatever we're doing, but we're all out there to enjoy the outdoors and to get some exercise and have fun with our family or friends or alone. But we're all out there to enjoy the outdoors. So I think boiling it down to that, just as simple as that is the most important thing in my opinion. Clear communication about what trail users might encounter is also really important. So signage at trailheads that says, you may encounter people on a snowmobile or on a horse and a bike or something, just so that people know ahead of time what they might encounter out there. That's really important, as well as communication of what the experience could be. This could be difficult. There are some steep hills, or you'll be far from the trailhead and far from access to other amenities. And that communication could be, on your maps, on your signage at your trailhead, and definitely should also be on some kind of web-based, communication as well, so that folks are planning their trip to the parks or to the trails, that they can know what to expect, and hopefully that can prevent some negative trail experiences as well. Promoting respectful speed, especially on shared use trails, super important. Again, that's not really enforceable, except for peer-to-peer enforcement, like, hey, you're going a little fast there, that was dangerous. It's not something that your agency is going to be able to enforce very well, but something that other trail users can hold each other accountable on. Again, with that first smile and say hi thing, I like to keep it simple, keep it positive, just communicate that positive interaction, building communities, say hi. These are your neighbors out on the trail. Get to know them, say hi when you pass them. And then, in some cases, communicating and understanding, understanding the needs of other trail users is important, especially when we're talking about, in this case, oftentimes equestrian trail users, horseback riders. They have some certain needs that other trail users are not necessarily as familiar with. Understanding the best way to pass someone on their horse or something, so that this sign is a good example that says stop, stand, and speak. If you speak, you stop movement and you speak to that equestrian, that horse will know that you're a human and not a mountain lion trying to chase them, because when someone's coming up fast on a bike, it's hard for a horse to know what's coming at them. So just speaking, saying hi again, is really is the best way to go about that. If we have time, I do have about a 1.5-minute video, if there's audio, on the next slide. I love videos. Cool. So
We'll be able to see the video. We won't have audio with it, correct?
okay.
Yeah. We can watch it.
Yeah, we can look at it a little bit. I can also provide a link to it if you'd like. I would love to have a Michigan version of this video. Right now, this video is one that I found that comes out of Oregon. It was put together out of a partnership with, I believe, Oregon State Parks, a mountain biking group in Oregon, and I believe Backcountry Horsemen, or an equestrian trail group in Oregon, to talk about just positive trail user interaction and how to promote that.
And we'll do questions after the video.
Sounds good. Yep. So there is some good dialogue that goes along with this video. And I don't know it well enough to completely reenact it, but.
Stop, speak, smile. Let's say you're hiking with friends and encounter some horseback riders. Stop and head off the trail to the downhill side.
Hey, beautiful horse. Is this enough room?
Yeah, we're good. Thank you for asking.
Some horses are easily startled, so say something as soon as you see them.
We'll get out of your way.
Bike riders who meet up with horses should stop and move their bikes off the trail.
Is this far enough?
Yep, thank you, that's fine.
While hikers may notice bikers on the trail first and step aside,
Come on through.
bikers are again expected to stop and clear the trail.
Thanks for stopping.
You got it.
When mountain bikers meet each other on the trail, the biker riding downhill needs to stop and let the biker riding uphill pass.
Come on by. Thanks, man. There's one more behind me.
The mountain biker who is passing should share how many are in the group so they'll know whether to wait or not.
Thanks a lot. Last one.
Stop, speak, smile. You'll keep our trails a nice and safe place to be.
Okay, I think we've got a couple of questions here.
I heard you talk about the Citizens Advisory Group. Is there one per region? And how would someone get on that group?
Yeah, great question. So for trail-specific advisory groups, we have 5. A larger kind of umbrella group, the Michigan Trails Advisory Council, MTAC, MTAC, is a governor-appointed council, and that group represents all types of trail users. So motorized trail users and non-motorized trail users sit on that group. That group is, established via state law, and then underneath MTAC there are 4, smaller subgroups. One for snowmobiling, one for off-road vehicles, one for equestrian trails, one for other non-motorized trails. That kind of encompasses all of the different recreational users that we have on trails. And those groups are not governor appointments, but they're appointments made by the group themselves. So some of the folks that serve on our groups there are a few local government representatives, folks who work in planning or local parks, a lot of nonprofits that support trails or outdoor recreation, and then some of those groups that are really connected to some of our programs, like our off-road vehicle trail clubs or snowmobile trail clubs. We have a great website that kind of lays that out a little bit, and you can also get in touch with me. My email's there. You can chat with me afterwards. If you have an interest, or if there's an interest, we do have openings on those boards, and those positions do rotate as terms expire. But those groups really help us identify what's going on out on the trails in real time, and discuss issues, whether it's funding or trail management or working with other partners and agencies. Mm-hmm.
I thought I saw another question. Up there's Stan.
Well, not such a question, but I just want to thank you for being here today. I mean, the conference that I attend, whether it's a national conference or a state, whether it's the Bureau of Land Management, National Parks, or the DNR, the sessions are always well attended, which I think speaks volume, is that residents of counties have a lot of priorities, but I think one consistent one is the park. So hopefully going forward in the future, we can build even stronger partnerships to help you with your messaging and what we can do. And if you're looking for people to serve on the committees, a great resource is just pass the information on to Mac. But thanks for being here, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm happy to come talk.
A hand in the back.
Yeah, has there been much discussion in the Department of Parks, Trails as an economic development tool and attractor to communities, or have you guys talked about that much?
Yes, we do, and especially now that we have a recently established Office of Outdoor Recreation. So that was an appointment made by the governor 2019, 2020. I think our director of the Office of Outdoor Recreation Industry really helps to tie in where the department works and how that impacts the economy and different communities in the state. So he works with manufacturers of outdoor recreation equipment, in Michigan works with the tourism sector to help connect the facilities we have and the programs that we have with tourism. There's definitely a really strong link there. And that office also is coordinating the update of our statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, which is kind of our department's recreation plan. That also is a document we need to be eligible for land and water conservation grant funding. And in the efforts to update the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, he's doing a lot of survey work, surveying members of the public about their outdoor recreation use, and also looking into how outdoor recreation and the economy plays together.
Also, where do you see county's role in this whole process, or where maybe historically where we've been involved, and then where maybe you guys see us involved in the future? Yeah, so from I can speak, more to the trail side of things, but we work with counties really regularly for those, those alternative transportation types of trails, the paved trails that connect communities and go across counties and things like that. Often, working really closely with either county parks and rec departments or road commissions, road agencies to both fund projects together, plan projects together, and make sure that the efforts that we have going on, whether it's on state land or outside of state land, mesh well with the efforts that you have and the recreational needs that you have within your communities. And we can also be a little bit of a resource in providing connections to, what those grant sources are, how you build a project, how you put things together, as well as just working closely with counties. We have so many places where we have state land adjacent to county parks or county facilities, or working with the road commissions to manage either our trails or our roadways, kind of in partnership with county agencies.
Other question? I had a couple of quick questions to finish us up here. Going back to e-bikes, you mentioned about counties and their own facilities and what they would regulate. The state law that you mentioned that identified the 3 classes, does that apply to a county park trail as well? I mean, it would be the same regulatory structure that they would be enforcing.
Yes, it does. To my knowledge, apply to any publicly managed trail. So a trail on private land would not really fall into that, but any public agency managing trails that would apply to. But again, there's some flexibility there with that local jurisdiction being able to make changes as they see fit.
And then one quick shameless plug, at our annual conference in September, one of the workshops is on county park operations and trending issues and best practices. So if you have not registered yet for the annual conference, please do so. Thank you, Dakota.
Yeah, no problem. I'll mention maybe one more thing about e-bikes that we're seeing as an issue. There are a lot of bikes on the market that don't fit the 3 classes that are defined. I've been calling them unclassed bikes, but they're bikes with electric motors that are way more powerful than what's defined in state law, or some other features that make them not fit those 3 classes. And that's something that we're struggling with a little bit too. I've seen that you can buy class 1, 2, 3 stickers on the internet and put them on whatever bike you want, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter unless it's a big problem or there's an incident on the trail. But it muddies the water for us and makes management a little bit more difficult. When the industry tried to define 3 classes, and then now there's bikes that don't fit those classes, and we're not sure what to do with them when we see them. But challenges arise.
Great. Thank you for being with us today, Dakota.
Yeah, thank you.